As we discussed in depth last hour, aid is trickling into Gaza, but the U.S. said it amounts to a teaspoon of what is actually needed after an 11-week blockade by Israel. That blockade, which began during a ceasefire and weeks ahead of Israel's renewed military offensive, has brought Gaza to the brink of widespread famine. Strong condemnation from corners of the globe, normally not that critical of Israel. A day after Israel launched a new and very deadly offensive to, as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu put it, quote, move toward full control of Gaza, the UK, France and Canada, three of Israel's most powerful allies, issued a joint statement calling the ground offensive and the Israeli humanitarian blockade, quote, wholly disproportionate and egregious. They also threatened to take unnamed actions if the situation doesn't change. And the UK later took the additional step of suspending talks with Israel on expanding a free trade agreement. Netanyahu has responded by saying the UK, France and Canada are, quote, on the wrong side of humanity, end quote, and vowed to escalate the war until all areas of Gaza are under Israel's security control. Those are his words. The Israeli military says it struck more than 100 targets in Gaza over the past 24 hours. The Gaza Health Ministry says at least 74 people were killed. Israel's most powerful ally, the United States, has not directly criticized Israel's new operation, although last week President Trump offered a mild criticism of the humanitarian situation in Gaza, saying that, quote, a lot of people are starving and that the U.S. wants to help. At the same time, Trump has also been pushing a plan which would relocate Palestinians from Gaza to surrounding countries so that he can help build a, quote, Riviera of the Middle East, as he calls it. Yet two White House officials tell Axios that, quote, Trump has been frustrated by the ongoing war in Gaza and upset by images of suffering Palestinian children and has told his aides to tell Netanyahu to wrap it up, end quote. The U.S. also bypassed Israel to get Israeli-American hostage Idan Alexander released from Hamas. Trump notably didn't stop in Israel during his recent Middle East trip, a trip in which the war in Gaza, the hostages, and the humanitarian crisis were mere footnotes. Joining me now is Aaron David Miller. He's a senior fellow for the American Statecraft Program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Miller was previously the senior advisor for Arab-Israeli negotiations at the State Department. He has served as an advisor to 6 secretaries of state. Aaron, it is great to see you again, as always, under not fantastic circumstances. Here's my hopeful question for you. Given how transactional Donald Trump is, given how much he likes making and taking credit for deals, whether he's involved in them or not, does that give you some sense that he might try and get something done between Israel and the Palestinians in Gaza?
Fascinating question, Ali, and thanks for having me. Look, governing's about choosing, right? So at the same time, this president has undertaken the two issues in which Israel and the U.S. do not see eye to eye, to say the least. One is how to end the war in Gaza. The second, I would argue from the president's perspective, is probably the more important play, is what to do about Iran's putative pursuit of a nuclear weapon, or at least its advanced nuclear program. And the reality is, I think the president has made a choice. After 5 rounds of negotiations with the Iranians, his envoy, and the Iranian mediator, Araghchi, continue to suggest that an agreement is possible. That's the one I think the president is interested in. Whether or not he's going to choose to confront this Israeli prime minister on how to end the war in Gaza, I think is very much still, Ali, an open question. The president has demonstrated it's something that no Republican or Democratic president has ever, and I've worked for administrations from Jimmy Carter to Bush 43. He's chosen twice now to reach out to Hamas. He's cut a deal with the Houthis, which allows the Houthis to strike Israel with long-range ballistic missiles and drones, as long as they don't strike American naval assets. And he's moving to cut a deal with the Iranians on the nuclear issue without coordination, close coordination with Israel. No Republican president, no Democratic president I ever worked for would do any of those things. Now, whether that's going to amount to bringing pressure on Israel in a way that you and I, or normal humans, would regard as sustained or serious, I think that's still, Ali, very much an open question.
When he was in Riyadh on the now famous Middle East trip, he spoke of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East in transactional terms. He said, we're here to do business. They signed lots of deals. He implied, we're not here to give you lectures on either human rights or relations with Israel. He knew he was getting nowhere wasn't going to get anywhere with the Saudis on this trip anyway. And yet, as you said, he's pursuing this deal with Iran, maybe. He made overtures to the new Syrian leader. it's complicated. It's hard to put him in a bucket on this stuff.
It is. I mean, he's a transactional president, or he wants quick, easy wins, though. That's, I think, part of the. Well, that's why we're seeing those are the headlines. Whether those headlines relate in trend lines, that is to say, agreements, is clearly right now, in my view, somewhat doubtful. Look, in Ukraine, only he wants to end the fighting, but not the war.
Right.
In Israel, Gaza, he wants to release the hostages and end the war, but he's not interested in investing in any reasonable plan for better governance in Gaza, let alone a track that would take on how to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian problem. And I think with Iran, he's looking for a deal that will park the Iranian issue for the remainder of his term, but not some sort of transformation that will somehow remove the ever-present threat of Iran's being one screwdriver's turn away from developing a nuclear weapon. So looking for easy wins, very transactional. And frankly, he's subordinated the American national interest. He's emptied it of any sort of values. You know, he says he's not going to lecture the Gulfies. What stays in Riyadh, what happens in Riyadh is going to stay in Riyadh. And yet he turns around in the Oval and directly intercedes in South African internal politics by creating this sort of fantasy that the Afrikaner community is somehow undergoing a genocide. I mean, it really reflects to a large degree a guy who subordinated the American national interests to his financial interests, to his political interests, and if he could get them, fine, wins in Russia, Ukraine, Gaza, and with Iran.
Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation in Gaza is getting worse, and the families of the 20 remaining hostages believed to be alive, and many who are not alive, have largely given up hope that there's anything else going to come of this, because Donald Trump got the one remaining person out over whom he had some direct influence. It's not looking any more hopeful in that actual situation of hostages and Gazans.
No, it's not. But this one, I think, is on the back of the current Israeli prime minister. You know, you can understand in the wake of the trauma of October 7th, the willful, indiscriminate killing of civilians, the sexual predation, the mutilation, the taking of hostages. You can understand that the Israelis really want to decimate and demolish Hamas. And the truth is, they have as an effective military organization. But the key issue, supported by every public opinion poll, continues to show that avenging the dead is much less important than redeeming the living. Bringing back 59 hostages, 20, according to the Israeli prime minister, that are alive, the rest are not. That, it would seem to me, and most Israelis agree, should be the overriding priority. But for the Israeli prime minister, it's not. He's tethered his future on trial for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in a Jerusalem district court. He has to maintain power over a very right-wing government, and that government constrains him. So I think you're going to see, I'm afraid, tragically, for the large number of Palestinian civilians who are suffering, for the hostages who are suffering, for the hostage families who are suffering, you're going to continue to see this Israeli prime minister, I think, continue to prioritize avenging the dead rather than redeeming the living. Total victory over Hamas, ending its capacity to govern. I wish it could happen, but it seems to me to be, in many respects, an unrealizable goal. And as a consequence, even according to Stephen Witkoff, who reportedly said to the hostage families that this is a pointless war.
Sadly, you and I were talking on October 9th, 2 days after this, and you expressed then that the goals may not be achievable. They are understandable, but they need to be understood in order to actually meet with success, and we're not there. Aaron, good to see you as always. Thank you for being with us. Aaron David Miller is a former senior advisor for the Israeli-Arab peace process.